Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. My name is James Batchelor, and today we are talking about, well, what everyone is talking about really, and that is used car values. Joining me to chat more about this is CAP HPI's Head of Valuations, Derren Martin. Hello, Derren.
Hi, James.
Lovely to have you on as always. Now, before I start asking you lots and lots of questions about what we're seeing at the moment, can you just give us a bit of an overview about specifically what you're seeing in the market at the moment?
Yeah, sure. Well, so we're fairly well documented about the price rises that we've seen over the last, well, since car showrooms reopened, really. Probably the best thing is if I show a bit of something in a sort of graphical form that highlights some of the changes that we've had as a bit of background for what's happening now. So if you just bear with me, just share this. So this graph shows some of the movements or the monthly movements that have been made. So we have a live product and are valuing vehicles every day, but then we still cut off at the end of the month for monthly customers. And what this shows is the value movements over that time. And you can see the red bars are 2021, where values have been moving. And in previous years, generally, values come down as cars age within their life cycle. Values cars tend to depreciate and deflate in value. But you can see what's happened there in the last 3 months. The 2% move up in May, which was what happened in our live values in April, was the biggest movement that we'd made since 2009, which was obviously the recovery from 2008. So 2% was pretty dramatic. And then you can see what's happened since then. 6.7% during May for June, and then it continued during June for July, 4.8%. Overall, that is over 13% up on over those 3 months. So some unbelievable value movements.
That is extraordinary. Now, let's just talk about the start of the year there, January, February, and March time. Even though showrooms were closed during that time, customers could still buy cars via click and collect, weren't they? So, did that have an effect on valuations and the movements then?
It did to a certain degree. You can see there that the values were slightly further down than you would probably expect, certainly in February. Which is what happened during January. So the 1.4% and the 1.5% values were reducing then, but that was partly off the fact that there were less cars being sold because we were in lockdown, partly off the fact that values had been fairly strong last year as well. So there was a bit of a realignment in Q4 last year that you can see on the right-hand side with the 2.1 and the 3%. So there's a little bit of realignment there, which continued in the first couple of months of this year. So it's slightly unusual at the time for them to be down, but obviously in the situation we were in, it was actually not as bad as it probably could have been, really, because car showrooms were open and were obviously faring a lot better than they did in lockdown 1, which feels like a very long time ago now when there was pretty much no activity in the market.
Yes, yeah, I remember this time last year there was no activity, was there? And it was a very different situation to how we are now. But the important thing to note here, though, is that we are only halfway through July, aren't we? And already we're nearly up 5%. So are you thinking that July is going to be bigger than June, and this is going to carry through to August?
That July figure is what happened during June. So we cut off at the end of June, and that becomes July's figure. So where we are at the moment in July, values are up about 2% already so far in July. So but it is definitely a lot slower than it has been, but values are still increasing. And if you put that into context of what I said, that 2% increase was the biggest we'd ever done at the time. So we're going to have 4 months on the trot where values have increased by more than we've ever done that before. And it's 4 on the trot as well. So these sorts of phenomena don't happen. It's a really unusual sort of black swan event. So it is, and we don't think it's going to carry on forever, but we do think that values are going to stay strong for a while.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll come back to you on that a little bit later on. But what else are you seeing at the moment?
So if I just show you sort of just how unusual that is by looking at the next chart. So we would normally expect values to to deflate by around 3 to 5% over the course of a normal year. You can see that a very normal year there in 2015. So what this does is it looks at 3-year-old cars that existed at the start of the year and at the end of the year. So the same models. So there's no new ones coming in to skew the figures. So you can see there 2015 very normal. Then 2016 quite normal as well, getting stronger each year though. Values, so cars only worth 1% less than the equivalent car was at the beginning of 2017. You then look at 2018 and values actually went up. We dubbed that the year of the used car at the time because it was very, very popular. Values were going up. We then had a bit of a recovery in 2019, basically values coming down and a bit of a change to what was going on in the market, especially around this sort of time, values dropping. So if you then look at what happened last year, it was quite a strong year pre-pandemic, and then very, very flat over the summer, which normally the values drop, but they didn't because there was quite a lot of activity. Then declined at the end of the year. If you then wait for what's happened this year, it's a completely different shape. It's completely different. Seasonality is out the window. It started off a little bit weaker, as that previous chart showed, and then it's just increased dramatically since April, and we're now 13.5% up, which includes sort of some plate uplift in there, but also includes some of these reductions at the start of the year. And if you think, even if we then started to decline in normal way, there's no way it's going to be anywhere near any of those previous years. So it's just so unusual. And if you look at some of the increases that we've had over that 3-month period, so this is over 3 months, at the 3-year 30,000 mile mark on used cars, the BMW Mini Cooper S has gone up by over £4,000. So that's, if you owned one of these cars and you owned it in April and you own it now, it's now worth £4,000 more than it was then.
I mean, that is absolutely extraordinary, isn't it? And really, the thing that strikes me about that list, though, there are obviously there's a bit of seasonality there, and obviously there's also an element of people treating themselves because of the last 12 months, things like the sporty and exotic stuff. But apart from that, it is things across the board, isn't it? It's SUVs, it's MPVs, it's small cars, it's sports cars. There isn't one type of car that's seeing an enormous price increase, is there?
It's everything. These are obviously the biggest movers in percentage terms, but you've got cars in there that are commodity cars that have so much volume of them around in previous times. Astra, Mocha, things like that. Where the Honda Jazz, where that car doesn't necessarily go up in value. There's just so much in their Ford product, which is obviously plentiful. But what's been happening is dealers have been out there. There's not so much stock out there. They're worried about the next few months for stock, and they've been buying these cars, and they've been having to pay top dollar for them. There's been remarketers that have been pushing their prices up constantly, trying to take advantage of the fact that there isn't a lot of stock out there. And why wouldn't they? They're just trying to achieve the best returns they can. Because of the shortages of semiconductors and other components, there's just concerns over these next few months with shortages of stock. So prices have just gone through the roof in the trade market. Retail market hasn't followed it quite to the same degree, but the retail market is now catching up as well. So, but yeah, you're right. Some of those cars in there, you would not expect them to have been going up by those amounts. And if you wanted to sell a car, now great time to sell, but obviously most people want to replace the car that they're selling, so it's not such a good time to buy for a consumer. But certainly, if you just wanted to sell a car, absolutely great time to do that.
Yeah. And I have been hearing stories, from a few friends of mine who are trying to sell a car, and they may be using a very well-known retailer, which gives you an online price for a car. And that retailer is constantly bugging them days after the valuation, and the price is going up and up and up. And for the consumer, they are very much in the pound seat here, aren't they? It's a good time if you're selling a car, isn't it?
Yeah, well, you've got the car buying services that want the cars. You've got the dealers that want the cars, and they offer their own sort of car buying services as well. They want the part exchanges, so they're competing more and more. When they get the part exchanges in, they're retailing them if they're of a reasonable quality, even cheaper end of the market. They're retailing those. They're not sending so many to auction, only the really poor quality ones. So yeah, there's a bit of a bun fight for stock, to be honest, and there are less cars in the market at the moment, stock wise. Because of less new car activity over the last few months, not just due to semiconductor shortages, but due to plants being closed, due to social distancing, and so they're not on full shifts, all of those sorts of things that have just reduced the new car supply, which then reduces used cars coming back in as swappers. So yeah, it's been a perfect storm really for used car values.
Yeah. I mean, is all of this changing the way dealers are having to acquire stock? Are they having to be a lot more savvy, or having to buy cars from people, or different companies which they wouldn't normally want to do so?
Yeah, definitely. They're looking on the internet for private sellers, so they're certainly buying from them. The private seller doesn't necessarily know what's been happening in the market, so they might be able to pick up some decent cars there for good prices. Companies like Motorway, so they're using companies like that quite a lot now as well. Those sorts of services, and just trying to be creative about how they acquire their stock, because prices from directory marketers are high, as I say. And that's sort of dragged auction prices up as well. So they're high, still good place to buy from auction, but obviously you've got fees there involved as well. So not necessarily buying all of their cars through those traditional routes. So yeah, definitely.
There's still a lot of risk associated with all of this, though, isn't there? With dealers having to pay over the odds for stock, and even though we were looking at that list that you brought up, some of those cars on there, that they're going to be able to sell them pretty easily, but there are some cars on there which could. They could be hot at the moment, but that could change, couldn't they? So there is an element of risk here that dealers are buying stock for high prices and then potentially not being able to sell them in a few months' time.
Yeah, they've got to be brave and push the retail prices up, which is happening more now. It needed to happen on cars that they maybe bought at cheaper prices a few months ago and hadn't, and were just looking for a margin rather than pushing the prices up of those. So they've had to be brave. They've got to be brave. They've got to pay these cars really, because the old adage, you can't sell an empty space on a forecourt. So you need the stock. But yeah, there is some concern amongst dealers that they might be left sort of carrying expensive stock if the market turned, but consumer demand is still strong. We don't think it's going to turn anytime soon. It seems to be a robust retail market out there, and obviously the consumer doesn't necessarily know what cars were worth 3, 4, 5, 12 months ago. They know what they're prepared to pay for the car now, and they know what they've got to pay to acquire those cars. So there are some prices that have gone up dramatically in the trade, but the retailers have got to sort of pass that on to the consumer and make a margin. And a lot of them are. A lot of the retailers are doing very, very well at the moment with their margins.
Yeah, I think you make an important point there, because people like us who are looking at these price rises, we're very much of the view that now is the wrong time to buy a used car. But if you put yourself in the consumer's shoes, they're probably coming to the market cold, aren't they? They're not aware of all of these price rises. And let's face it, customers probably fall into two camps. They probably want to, perhaps they want to buy a car because they're not going on holiday. So naturally, they'd probably be more prepared to spend more on the car they really, really want. And also, typically, people also need to buy a car in some instances, so they will pay those high prices because they just need to, don't they?
They need a car and they want a car, and there's certainly we've been saying it for over a year now. They're looking for something that looks nice on the driveway. They're not going on holiday. They want something that cheers them up. They're not maybe doing the commute. They don't need that sensible vehicle so much. So that's why some of the convertibles and sports cars have gone up by the most. But yeah, it is unusual for the mainstream cars to be going up. But again, as you say, yeah, they may need those cars, and some of those cars, it makes perfect sense why they've been going up. You think about a Zafira, maybe you're going on a staycation or something like that, and you just need that size of vehicle. So yeah, and you've got to pay those prices. So yeah, Yeah, it's unusual, but I think also I think so. If you pay a high price for a car now, the prices aren't going to come crashing down. I think there's been a little bit of a reset of values going up. So it could be that they it's not going to be a disaster for them if they then come to sell that vehicle in 12 months' time or something like that. That it's not going to be as bad as it may, some people may think. Certainly with our forecasts, it's quite hard to judge where it's going to go. You've got some who would say, well, you can't reflect all of this strength that's in the market now, and some will say, well, you've got to put all the forecasts up because there's been a bit of a reset. So it's quite a testing time for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good news for just normal car buyers, isn't it? Because let's face it, we'd normally be having this conversation about really limited edition, rare Porsche 911s, wouldn't we? Where if you buy one and then you come to sell it in a year's time, you make a profit. Whereas you can make a profit on a Vauxhall Zafira, buy a Zafira to take away on your holiday, come back and sell it, and you may be able to sell it for the higher price than you actually bought it for. It's extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you might have done that if you'd bought one a few months ago. I'm not sure you would if you did it now. I wouldn't be recommending going down that route. That's a bit risky. But yeah, certainly if you'd bought one in April and had a crystal ball of what was going to happen to values, you could have run it for the summer and definitely sold it for a profit.
Yeah.
We're also, I mean, this month so far. So I showed the values where they've been for the last 3 months. But yeah, as I say, this month values are up 2% so far. I think they'll probably end up about 3% up, which will be, again, the third biggest increase we've ever seen in a single month. Again, it's mainstream cars that are going up in value. Maybe they've got a little bit more room to increase because they were already lower previously because they're in such high volumes in the past. So a little bit more room for them to increase. We've even seen used electric vehicles going up in value, which hasn't been happening. You've got a bit more, I think it's out in the press a lot more now about electric vehicles, but also I think dealers are taking a bit more of a punt on them and thinking, right, well, I need some stock. There's not a lot of stock out there. So an electric vehicle, yeah, why not? So it's just becoming more and more popular. So, I mean, they're not going up dramatically, but they are increasing in value as well. And the same with hybrids. So it has been pretty much across the board. So, and I think it's going to, so as I say, this month will go up. We're into the holiday season. Not that many people are going away as before. We think it will stay strong next month as well. Probably not going up by as much, but we do think that values will sort of remain strong, and the data that we're receiving still from the remarketers and the auctions is still above monthly cap values, which means in our live product we're putting the values up.
Yeah. Is one reason why values aren't going to come crashing down because of the semiconductor crisis? Because let's face it, it's going to get worse. This, isn't it, for the rest of the year, and especially in the new car market. These delays are being felt right into the first part of next year, really, aren't they? So we're going to be talking about semiconductors for quite some time, aren't we?
Yeah, well, it's not just semiconductors either. I think it's steel, it's rubber, it's foam. There's all sorts of things that are going on in that market. With the semiconductors, though, the automotive market hasn't been in pole position to receive those. They're not the number one customer for the sort of electronics. It's the iPhones and that type of thing that are in the box seat for that. So yeah, there are. We think this quarter will be the worst affected. So going obviously that includes September. So September new car registrations are going to be affected. It'll be really interesting to see by how much. It's different by brand. Not every manufacturer is badly affected, and you can see that in some of the registration figures for June. But we hear of cars that were due September being pushed back into early next year or late this year. I heard today that people are saying it won't get back to normal until almost maybe well into next year. So I think we're in for some months of less new cars, which mean people look for used cars. But obviously less new cars means less used cars as well, which can maintain prices. But we do have some cars that are very close to new car list, which is very unusual. Some have gone over new car lists, and that generally is not sustainable. Obviously, you can't get the new cars in any volume at the moment, but it's generally not sustainable for used cars to be above new list prices. So that's why they can't keep going up, in our opinion, but they could stay relatively strong.
Yeah, and and we're talking about the car market there. It's totally different in the world of vans as well, isn't it? That's an entirely different subject point, probably one for another day, really. But you said 2018 was the year of the used car. Do you think you're going to revise that and say 2021 is the year of the used car?
Quite possibly, yeah. Part yeah. So another very very strong used car year this year, yeah. And I think it will continue, yeah.
Yeah. Well, fantastic, Derren. We're going to have to leave it there for today, but always good to catch up and hear what's going on in the used market. And we'll probably have the same conversation again in a month's time. So for today, thanks for coming on.
Okay, thanks, James.
Well, that's it for today's Car Dealer Live. Join us again very soon. Bye-bye.